Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and hello to all of you. This is chapter 3, approaches for determining the required retirement capital. And in this topic, we basically want to solve the issues of how much do you need for retirement, how much you need to accumulate, how much you need to have in your accumulation fund in order to cater for your retirement period. And it is very basically that the total amount of financial resources required for retirement varies between one person to another. And obviously it depends on how long an individual still alive in this earth. The determination of lump sum need or required retirement capital. In this chapter, we are going to learn 4 approaches in determining the lump sum need for the retirement. Number 1 is through capital liquidation without inflation factor. The next will be capital liquidation by considering inflation factor. The third one is capital conservation without inflation factor. And the fourth one is capital conservation with an inflation factor. The capital liquidation actually is suitable for those who have no dependents, possibly who have no children to take care of, or possibly they don't have, like parents to take care, or whoever, belong or qualified to be their dependents. So capital liquidation, this might be suitable for this individual, those who have no dependents, or possibly if they have another arrangement for their dependents. For example, not specifically for this retirement purpose, but they might have another plan for their dependents. So this capital liquidation might be suitable for them. Nevertheless, if an individual, let's say they have dependents, they have wife who is not working, at the same time they have children they have to take care of, then capital conservation might be suitable for that particular purpose. Moreover, if someone feels like they still want to contribute or want to give a donation, to continue to give a donation even after they die, so this, if they have this particular attention, if they have this particular intention, they can also choose for capital conservation approach. Later on, we're going to look at what does it mean by capital liquidation as well as capital conservation. Now, we are going to look at capital liquidation without inflation factor. Capital liquidation approach provides annual retirement income in such a way that retirement resources are expected to be fully liquidated when a person passes away, which means if someone dies, then the balance of the retirement fund at that particular time is expected to be zero. Which means, let's say someone retired at the age of 60 and it is expected to die at the age of 80, then this is the retirement period of 20 years, which means if an individual, they live longer than these 8 years, there will be no more retirement fund left, which means the balance of the retirement at this point of time when they reach beyond 80 years old will be zero. Okay, so if an individual lives longer than expectation, there will be no more earmarked resources available. Nevertheless, if the individual passed away prematurely or earlier than the expectation, there will be surplus of the fund available. So let's say the retirement age start at 60, but possibly at the age of 65, this individual pass away, then the still remaining fund in this retirement fund under capital liquidation method. Therefore, it is important to understand that the accuracy in determining the life expectancy of an individual is crucial. And given that the medical research, the improvement in healthcare, the average lifespan basically has increased. Therefore, it is important for the planners to ensure that there is no under-provision of such income, in the sense that possibly if they assume that the age of their retiree is just up to possibly 80 years, but in reality it might happen where this particular individual live longer and reach like 95 years, for example. So it is something that can happen. But if the situation is like this, then it will be awkward, because it seems that the retiree don't have any source of income after they reach the age of 80 years. Therefore, it is important for financial planner to discuss about this with the client. This is an example, a schedule showing constant income stream of 60,000 for 20 years. And in this instance, we can see here the year 1 till the year of 20 years. And we can see the beginning balance of 729,487, that is in the first year. And this column actually related to the annual income payment made at the beginning of the year to the client. This is the rate of return of 6%. We take that assumption, and this is the ending balance at the end of the year. As we can see, by having this 729,487 in the first year, it is able to cater for the annual income. This is a static annual income of 60,000 per year for 20 years. And once we reach the 20th year, the balance here will be zero, means that there will be no money left after 20 years. We can see that, as in this beginning balance, we have to minus the annual income that should be paid at the beginning of the year to the client of 60,000. And after that, the balance of the money will be invested. Thus, we can expect a rate of return of 6% times with 669,487. Where can we get this 669,487? We have to this one, 729,487 minus with 60,000, then we can get 669,487. And out of this figure, we take a rate of return of 6%, which means it's equal to 40169. And we have to add back this value, 40169 plus with 669,487, then we can get the ending balance of 709,656. As in this table, we can see that the client need to accumulate up to 729,487 to cater for 20 years of retirement period, where every year they will be able to get an income for 60,000 per year. Okay, and this value is often make the client feel surprised, because it seems that for them it is actually very, very high. Nevertheless, once we show them this calculation, they will finally be able to understand the operation of this table, or how the money flow works. And at the end of the day, we can prove that by the end of the 20th year, the money left is zero. We are now still in capital liquidation without inflation factor, where we are just have a look at the schedule showing constant income stream of 60,000 for 20 years, and we can see that the beginning balance that the client must have is 729,487. And the formula for us to get this figure, that is the first year retirement income, that is 729,487, is by using this formula, okay, where the PV is total lump sum need, A is annual retirement income, R is rate of return, and number of years in retirement phase. And if we substitute the figures, where the payment or annual retirement income is 60,000, R is 6%, N is 20, then we'll be able to calculate the sum of 729,487. Nevertheless, if you want to use financial calculator, you can also do so by setting begin, because we expect that the payment will be made at the beginning of the year. Therefore, go to CMPD, set begin, N is 20, I 6%, payment 60,000, future value is 0, PY and CY both 1 and 1, and you solve for PV, that will be 729,487. Alright, so this figure is basically similar to the figure here in the beginning balance on the first year. Okay? In this situation, what if the client intend to withdraw the annual income at the end of the year? In that particular case, we can see that the lump sum required will be reduced from 729,487 to 688,195. And if you want to prove this, you can use the formula as in here by substituting the figures, or you can just simply using your financial calculator, similar information as here, except where the CMPD here, when you go for set, you should set N, not begin. Then you can see the PV. Once you solve the PV, you can see that the figure is 688,195. And in order to convince your client, you also have to draw the table like this to prove that 688,195 is needed here in the first year of the retirement in order to cater for 60,000 payment made at the end of the year for 20 years. Now, we are going to look at capital liquidation with inflation factor. Since inflation reduced the purchasing power of the annual income, having unchanged income of 60,000 will mean that the retiree will live an increasingly difficult life during inflation. So, in this case, in this capital liquidation with inflation factor, it suggests that the annual income is expected to increase following the in conjunction with the inflation rate. Therefore, in this case, assuming that the inflation rate is 4%, the total lump sum required for retirement shall be 1,007,416. So that is supposed to be the required amount of capital in the first year, that is 1,007,416. Okay, it's about 1,007,416. And if we look at the table for capital liquidation with inflation factor, by considering the inflation rate of 4%. This is the table of calculation where this is in the first year we can see the beginning balance of 1,007,416 with the annual income for the first year is 60,000 with a return of 6%. Okay, so how we can calculate for the return? Beginning balance minus with the annual income, then we can get 947,416, okay, times with 6% of return in this case, then we can get 56,845. Okay, so beginning balance minus with annual income, add with the rate of return, then with the return, then we can get the ending balance of 1,004,261. Okay, so if we look at this table, at the end of the 20 years, we can see that the remaining balance is 0. And another thing that's important for me to highlight is where you can see the annual income is increasing. Like this one is 60,000 for the first year. The second year it improves to 62,400 and it keeps increasing. And it is considering that it is growing up to 4% because of the inflation that happened on that particular year. So this is the assumption where every year there will be a 4% inflation or increase in the inflation rate. All right, how can we basically calculate for this amount, that is the first year retirement fund or the required amount of capital? For this capital liquidation with inflation factor, we can use this formula. So this is basically the formula required, and it has an element of G, where G here referring to the rate of inflation, or sometimes they also call it a rate of growth of annual income in order to maintain the purchasing power. Okay, so let's say if we try to substitute all the figures from this formula, then we can get this amount that is 1,007,416. Okay, this is the required amount of capital on the first year, how much that the client must have in order to cater for 20 years expenses. Okay, beside of using the formula, you can also calculate this figure by using the calculator. Okay, nevertheless, as in this case, you have to change the rate of return by adjusting for the inflation rate, where this is the formula, nominal rate of return minus with the inflation rate divide with 1 plus inflation rate. Therefore, the rate of return 6 minus 4 divided with 1.04, then you can get the real rate of return of 1.923077%. And then you go to your calculator, again, go to CMPD, set begin, because it's expected that you make a payment at the beginning of the year. N is 20, I is 1.923077, because you have already making adjustments with the inflation. So RV is 0, PY 1, CY 1. The payment is 60,000, and if you go to PV, you solve for PV, then you can get 1,007,415 or 1,007,416, very close to the figure that you can get from using the formula. What if the inflation is similar to the rate of return? As we can see from the previous example, in the example before, the inflation is 4%. Okay, inflation is 4%, but the rate of return is 6%. Then we can calculate the real rate of return, and we can get 1.923 as in the formula before, okay, where we already adjust for the inflation in the calculation of the rate of return. And the situation now, what if the inflation is similar to the rate of return? Because there's a limitation in that particular formula, is where when the inflation is similar to the rate of return, both the numerator and denominator in the formula will be 0. Therefore, in order to overcome this problem, there will be another formula that we have to follow, and it is quite simple. PV N times A, where N is number of years during retirement and A is the annual retirement income. Therefore, in this case, if we look at this formula, given that the number of years is 20 years and the annual retirement income is 60,000, we can just simply times 20 times with 60,000, then we can get 1.2 million. Which means when the inflation rate is equal to rate of return, the amount needed, the lump sum needed for retirement is 1.2 million. In this table, we are going to prove that when there is a similar percentage of rate of return and inflation rate, we can see that this 1.2 million is sufficient to cater for 20 years expenses. As in this case, we can see that here, based on our calculation, that is 1.2 million. Therefore, the beginning balance in the first year is 1.2 million. The annual income is 60,000, that is for the first year. The return is 6%, okay? And the ending balance will be 1,208,400, okay? And you can see here that the annual income increased up to 6%, because this following the inflation rate, and the return also, it increased 6%. I mean that the value is based on the 6% of the interest, and by using this situation, we can see that at the end of the 20th year, the ending balance is 0. Which means this 1.2 million we previously calculated will be able to cater for the inflation rate of 6%, as well as the return we also can get from the investment, that is actually 6%, and it is sufficient to cover the expenses of the client for 20 years. And at the end of the 20th years, we can see that the balance is 0. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and hello to all of you. Just now we already have a look at the capital liquidation for us to calculate the lump sum retirement income, and the second part is about capital conservation approach. And in this approach, in this video, I'm going to explain about capital conservation without inflation factor. What makes difference between capital liquidation and capital conservation is where in the capital liquidation approach, at the end of the terms, at the end of the period, the balance that your client has in the account of the retirement is basically 0. This is because the amount of saving has been used over the entire period of the retirement. For example, let's say they make a reserve of the retirement for 20 years of the retirement years. Therefore, at the end of the 20 years, they will have no balance remain in the retirement account. Nevertheless, for capital conservation approach, in this approach, the capital sum will be maintained. Okay, in the sense that for certain people where the amount of retirement is just simply sufficient for themselves and they are not be able to share the retirement fund that they have with their dependents, with their children's or any other purposes. But for certain people, they have more resources and they can basically go extra mile in the sense that they will be able to maintain the beginning balance in the first year, and this amount will also remain the same once they reach the end of the retirement period. And this is the situation where after the end of the 20 years, okay, you can see that there's still a balance in their account. And if this will be the case, that at the end of the 20 years they die, still they have a huge amount of money in the retirement fund for them to pass this money to the children or the dependents or relatives or whatsoever purposes that they have in mind. Okay, let's have a look at this. For people, capital conservation basically aims at conserving the capital sum that provides annual income for the retirement, which means the capital sum. This is the beginning balance that we use to generate the annual income. This amount will be remain. It will be conserved. Ya, ia akan dipelihara. For people with limited resources, the amount available for retirement may not even be sufficient for retirement. Okay, this is the situation where the people might have a limited amount of fund in the retirement. The pool of fund that they have during retirement may not be able to cater for their own expenses. Nevertheless, they cannot afford the luxury of conserving capital for retirement, in the sense that that particular money might be just simply sufficient or not enough for themselves, so they just need to keep that to cover the expenses for that particular individual only. Nevertheless, there are certain individuals who have the resources to go extra mile, who can actually preserve the capital sum, and at the same time, in the case they die, then the money can be passed to other person, to dependents or to the children. And this is the case of the capital conservation without inflation factor that I want to show to you. The table, you can see the capital conservation without inflation factor, the beginning balance is 2.1 million, and considering the annual usage of 100,000 and return of 100,000, then the ending balance is 2.1 million. And if you look at this table, this is the first year going to the second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year. And if you continue with this style, okay, till you reach the 20th year, you can see that the ending balance is still 2.1 million. Okay, this is a situation where you use or you are taking 100,000 per year of the annual income, as well as at the same time you receive a return of 100,000. Okay, so the annual retirement income in this case is 100,000 and remain constant for the entire 20 years in the retirement, because in this approach, we didn't consider the inflation factor. So that's why you can see that the annual usage is constant for 100,000 per year, and therefore you can see from here that this is situation where, okay, I'm sorry for the distraction that we had just now. I'm going to repeat my explanation again. As you can see that the usage, annual usage is similar, which means that in this case we didn't consider the inflation, and at the end of the 20th year you can see that the balance is still similar, which remain at 2.1 million. So two things that has been maintained under this model. We can see that there's no increase in the annual usage, and this is basically in certain, you know, like in the economic situation, this is something unacceptable, basically, because we believe that the inflation occurs, and every year there must be an increase of their cost of living. Therefore, we are supposed to consider the inflation factor, but that is something that we are going to look at after this. But for this example, we can see that they didn't take into account the cost, the inflation cost, so that's why the annual usage is constant, is similar for the whole of the period. Okay, so the annual retirement income is maintained at 100,000, and the original capital sum is also maintained towards the end of the year. Alright, this model actually is suitable for those who want to take care of the dependents. For example, they have children, they have small children, so that's why they need to use this model, because in the case of the death of the retiree, still they have some, you know, like quite a lot of fund in the retirement fund for them to cover the expenses for the small children they have, or also for dependents. Okay. The limitation of this model is where we didn't take inflation into account. It is something that ridiculous, because we know that the purchasing power keep increasing from the first year to the 20th year. So that's why it is a part of the limitation that they have in this model. All right. The formula for us to come up with 2.1 million, the original lump sum that we have in the table, this is basically the formula for capital conservation without inflation factor. PV equivalent to A, 1 plus R divided with R, and it can be written as A divided with R plus A, and the PV is actually referring to the lump sum required for the retirement. The first year annual retirement income is 100,000. The rate of return is 5%, and we can calculate here. The PV is 100,000 times with 1.05 divided with 0.05, so we can get 2.1 million. So this is the lump sum required for retirement. Okay, so if you look at the table here, all right, this is the lump sum required for retirement, the beginning balance of the first year that your client must have, that is 2.1 million. Alright, now we are going to look at the capital conservation with inflation factor, where we will see that there is an increase in the annual usage, the beginning balance, the return, as well as the ending balance by 4%. Okay, as we can see in the example, right, once we consider the effects of inflation, the annual retirement income will increase at a rate equivalent to the inflation rate, in the sense that the annual usage will reflect the inflation that happened in that particular situation. So as in this table, you can see that the beginning balance is 10,500,000, and the annual usage in the first year 100,000, the return is 520,000, the ending balance is 10,920,000. to 920,000. And if you look at this table, you can see that there is an increase of 4% every year for the beginning balance to cater for the increase of the inflation every year in the annual usage, and the return also will increase up to 4% per year, as well as the ending balance also increase up to 4% a year. If you look at this table, at the end of the 20th year, you know, the beginning balance here is 10,500,000 in the first year. Okay, here 10,500,000. But once you reach the 20th year, okay, the balance is 23 million. Okay, the balance is 23 million. This is very huge. And at the end of the 20th year, it becomes 23 million. And it's not going to stop there. If, for example, you continue with this calculation for 30 years, then you can see that it will increase again up to 683,000, and you know, it keep multiplying, and the original capital sum will reach up to 74 million in the 50 years. Okay, in the 50 years, 50. Okay, once they reach 50 years, the amount of the ending balance will reach 74.6 million. Okay, so therefore, this is what they call where the capital conservation with inflation factor is actually a part of the combination of the retirement as well as estate planning, because they are not only cover for the retirement expenses for the retiree, but also they can, you know, like conserve the amount in the retirement fund, and once they die, this is something that they can pass to the next generation, and the amount is so huge, you know, like after 20 years it reached 23 million, and after 50 years they can have 74 million. It's like they created a legacy, you know, legacy, or the fund or the foundation for themselves if they want to distribute the money to the family or relatives, or if they have an intention to provide the sponsorship to the students, or for wakaf, for example. So this is a part of their plan that they have. So this is actually a combination of retirement as well as the estate planning. So once the client is still alive, of course your client have control over this fund, but once they die, because the amount is so huge, they possibly need a trustee, you know, the lawyer, the trustee, or the beneficiaries who are going to take care of this money, because the money is basically very, very huge. Okay, so how we can identify the beginning balance of 10,500,000 here? How can we get this calculation? So you can use the formula for capital conservation with inflation. You can have a look at this formula. Okay, PV A1 plus R equal to R minus G, where we consider the inflation rate. G is basically the inflation rate of 4%, and if you calculate using this formula, you can get the 10,500,000 as the beginning balance that your client must have in order for her to have this planning, which actually a very huge plan, and it also involve a very huge amount. The start point is 10 million, and this is actually quite rare in the sense that not many people will have this privilege to have 10 million at the beginning of the retirement period. Alright, now we look at the example of capital conservation approach, where the capital sum to be conserved actually differ from the original capital sum. I read the question for you, and let's see how we are going to solve this problem. Jackson has decided to have a retirement plan that caters for his annual retirement income needs for 20 years, and at the same time ensure that the minimum sum of 500,000 is available for his children. So this is the amount of fund. This is the minimum sum of fund that he wants to pass to his children. The annual retirement income must grow at a rate similar to the inflation rate so that the lifestyle is not going to be affected, and his planner has summarized the variables and the assumption as follow. The first year annual income is 100,000. Rate of return is 5%. Okay, number of years expected in the retirement phase is 20. The inflation rate is 4%, and the amount to be passed to the successor is 500,000. Okay, therefore, in order for us to solve for this problem, we can use this formula. Okay, this is the example of capital conservation, where the capital sum that we want to pass to the next generation, or the ending balance, is different as compared to the capital sum we have at the beginning of the term. Alright, so in order to solve for this, alright, this is the amount to be passed to the successor or the children, and you follow this formula: PV A 1 plus R 1 minus 1 plus G divide 1 plus R power of N divide with R plus G plus CC. Okay, where these are basically the information that we have from the previous page. Okay, where the PV is actually lump sum retirement fund, A as the first year annual retirement income of 100,000, rate of return of 5%, the growth rate of annual income to cater for the inflation rate. Inflation rate is 4%, and number of years during retirement is 20, and amount to be passed to the successor is 500,000. And if you substitute the variables and you follow the calculation, then you can see here the PV that we need now, that your client need now, is 2,328,982. Okay, now we look at what are actually the factors that influence the lump sum need for retirement. We already calculate, we have many calculations before for us to identify lump sum need for retirement. It is where we can use capital liquidation approach with inflation factors, without inflation factors. We also have a capital conservation approach with considering inflation factors or without inflation factors. And we also have to know that there are other main variables that will affect the amount of lump sum need for retirement. That is basically the rate of return on retirement account, the first year retirement income, what is the amount of annual usage that your client want to have, the inflation rate, as well as the number of years in retirement. Later, we can see that once there is a slight change towards the rate of return, or the change to the first year retirement income, or the change in the inflation, the change of the number of years in the retirement, I mean that the period of the retirement where the fund want to cover, the change in all of this will actually give an influence towards the total lump sum need that your client must have for the retirement. Alright, we already have a look just now on what are the variables, what are the factors that will give an influence towards the lump sum need for retirement. Okay, that are the rate of return, first year annual income, the inflation rate, as well as number of years in retirement. So I'm going to explain the first variable that give a huge or significant influence towards the lump sum need for retirement. The first one is rate of return. The rate of return is something uncontrollable. There are many factors that affect the rate of return: the economics, the government, etc., etc. The point that I want to highlight to you here is that this is the example of a very small change in the rate of return, it will affect huge amount of the lump sum need for retirement. Okay, by taking an example, let's say in the case where the amount that the customer, the usage that the customer want is 60,000 and the rate of return is 6%, the end or the period of the retirement is 20, and G, that is the inflation, is 4%. And if you put it in the formula for us to calculate the total lump sum need for retirement, then we can see the lump sum need for retirement is 1,007,416. Okay, remember this is in the case where the rate of return is 6%. Nevertheless, let's say the rate of return increased from 6%, it increased to 7%. So if we change the 6%, okay, to 7%, we replace all of this information in the formula, we can see the lump sum need for retirement is now reduced, and it become 928,273. Okay, but what if the rate of return reduce? Okay, reduced by 1% and now become 5%. The baseline is where the rate of return is 6%. Now, if it is increased 1% to 7%, then it become like this. This will be the rate of the the lump sum need for the retirement. And if, for example, this amount or the rate of return reduced to 5%, we can see, if we change the amount in the formula, we can see that the lump sum need increase, because the baseline is 1,007,416, but once the rate of return reduced to 5%, it's now become 1,097,389. So it has been increased, which means the changes in the rate of return will give a huge impact towards the lump sum of the total retirement of your client. Okay, so by taking the example of this, let's say the baseline is 6%. Okay, this is the baseline, where when the rate of return is 6%, the inflation rate is 4%, the first year income is 60,000, number of years is 20, total income need is 1,007,416. But what if the rate of return reduced to 5%? Then this is the total income need that your client must have. What if the rate of the return become 4%, then this is 1.2 million is actually the lump sum need for the retirement that your client must have. But if the rate of return reduce, increase from 6 to 7 to 8, the increase of the rate of return will actually reduce the total income that your client need. So in this situation, you as a financial planner must know how to plan for this. What if the rate of return has been reduced? Okay, because it will affect the total income need for your client. But if your rate of return increase, then it will give a good news for your client. Okay, so this is a part of the things that you have to make sure on how you should take this into account to make sure that the plan, the financial plan that you develop, that you design for your client actually work. Alright, just now we already have a look at the impact of rate of return on the lump sum retirement fund, but now we're going to look at the impact of the inflation rate on the retirement fund. Inflation rate by itself, if you look at the concept of the inflation rate, the higher the inflation rate, okay, it will actually the higher the inflation, it will actually reduce your purchasing power. Okay, therefore, in order to maintain your lifestyle, in the case of high inflation, which means your purchasing power now has been reduced. In order to maintain your current lifestyle, it means that you need more money. Obviously, because you want to maintain your current lifestyle, and at the same time inflation has increased, which means that your purchasing power, the amount of money that you have now becomes smaller. And if you want to maintain the same lifestyles, same food that you want to eat, same house, same types of spending, then you basically need more money, in the sense that if the inflation goes high, it will also increase the amount of the retirement fund that you must have. But if the inflation reduce, it is a good situation where basically the amount of the lump sum need also will be reduced. Nevertheless, in the real situation where we expect that inflation will be reduced is something that very hard to happen. It is something that is quite illogical, and we hardly see this in the economy unless if there is what they call as a recession, or the bad economic situation, or economic turmoil. Only then, like the possibility of the reduce or the reduction in the inflation. Okay, now we look at the real situation normally happen once there is a changes in the inflation rate. By taking this example, for example, let's say the rate of inflation is as in this case is 4%. Okay, from 4% increase to 5%, because just now at the example that you have seen before, it is where the inflation is G is equivalent to 4%. Okay, the inflation rate is 4%. In the first example you see in the rate of return example, rate of inflation is 4%, and let's say is now the rate of inflation increased to 5%, and you can see once the inflation increased by 1%, okay, this is the baseline where the inflation is 4%. We can see the PV, the amount of lump sum need for retirement is 1,007,416, but once it's increased to 5%, the amount that we need is 1,098,303. Okay, so this is the situation where it increased by 1%, from 4% to 5%. And what if it is reduced from 4% now become 3%? Then we can see the lump sum need also reduced to 926,113. And if we look at the change in the profit table, where, okay, sorry for that, where you can see the changes in the inflation rate, considering that this is the baseline where the inflation is 4%. This is the lump sum need 1,007,416. But once the inflation increase become 4%, 6%, the inflation now has been increased, then you can see the amount of lump sum need also increase. But if the inflation reduced 3%, from 4% it reduced to 3%, okay, then you can see that the amount is lower now. The lump sum need is just 926,113, although the original baseline, if the inflation is 4%, it is 1,704,416. Okay, so basically in regards to the inflation, if the inflation increase, then the lump sum need also will be increased. But if the inflation reduce, then the lump sum need also will be reduced. Alright, now what if there is a changes in number of years during retirement? Just now in example we have, if you look at the example from the rate of return, the years in retirement is 20 years. This is the baseline. Okay, 6% of the rate of return, inflation rate is 4%, first year income is 60,000, years in retirement is 20. But once there is changes in the years of the retirement, once we increase from 20 to 21 years, if you change this amount in our formula, then we can see that the lump sum need now has been increased. Okay, we have to add another 40,992, where the lump sum need now become 1,048,408. What if we change the years in retirement to 22 years, now become 1,088,627? And what if the years in retirement reduce from 20 years to 19 or 18 years? We can see that the lump sum need also will be reduced. This means that the longer the years in retirement, the higher the lump sum that your client need. While if there is a reduction in the years of the retirement, the lump sum need also will be reduced. Alright, what if there's a changes in the first year annual income on total retirement fund? If you look at this variable, obviously, if there's an increase in the annual income on the retirement fund, on the first year annual income on the retirement fund, obviously the lump sum also will be increased. This is the situation where, you know, like sometimes your client might have unplanned fixed commitment. For example, let's say once they reach old age, they need more treatment for diabetic or hypertension, for example. So this might cause an increase toward the first year annual income. And obviously once this happened, then it will give an influence, huge influence toward your lump sum need. Okay, let's say for example, by taking an example, let's say the original example we have before is where the lump sum, the first year income is 60,000. Okay, use the similar example we have before. The first year income is 60,000. What if we change to 62,000 because of another 2,000 additional commitment that your client must pay? So by having this example, okay, if you look at the baseline where the first year income is 60,000, the lump sum need is 1,007,416, but by adding another 2,000, now becomes 62,000, we can see the lump sum retirement also increased to 1,040,996. Okay, so similar in the case if we reduce the lump sum from 60,000, the baseline of 60,000, we change to 58,000, in the sense that we reduce another 2,000 from that. The baseline is 60,000. Okay, the one that we have in the example here. Okay, 60,000. But now this 60,000 you reduce to 58,000, then your lump sum also will be reduced to 973,835. Okay. Alright, all the example that I've shown you before, that is basically on the changes in the inflation rate, the rate of return, the changes in the first year retirement income, as well as changes in the number of years during retirement. All the example that I've shown you just now. Okay, I give you the example again. Let's say if you're looking at this is the changes in the inflation rate. All right, where we are actually using the capital liquidation approach. Okay, capital liquidation approach in our calculation. Okay, but nevertheless, if we consider the changes in variable under capital conservation approach, you know, the effects will be similar. If there is an increase in the lump sum need, then obviously if there is an increase in the inflation, then the lump sum need also will be increased. So regardless whether you are using capital liquidation or capital conservation, it will give same effects or influence towards your lump sum need at the retirement.